Welcome back to the podcast. This episode is going to be so short and sweet because we're talking today about how do you find your Enneagram type? This is probably the most common question I get where people are wondering, does a quiz, does a quiz solidify it, a test, or is there like an official one? Do you have to have an Enneagram certified coach like validate your type? What tells you your Enneagram type? So I'm going to give this to you plain and simple today. We're going to break it down. But first, I just have to ask you, why do you want to know your type? And like, be real with me. Shoot me straight. Do you want to know your type so you can fit in with all the Enneagram lovers and junkies at social events who are like, what's your type? What's your type? Because if so, literally just pick a number and go with it. Like that, if you're just wanting it for social status, then just pick something. But if you truly want to know your type, to understand yourself, and you're like, no, Callie, I really want to understand my Enneagram type so I know what motivates me, so I understand what's unhealthy about me, so I can learn how to be healthy and actually grow myself. Okay, cool, sis. I can help you out with that, and I can tell you what this journey is going to look like, because that's the key word, journey. This is a journey. The Enneagram is not this quick hit, fun social interaction to just know your type and chat about it. If that's what you're wanting it for, then literally just make up a number. But this is a journey for you to actually get to know yourself and to go deeper, and it can be a process, and that's a good thing for it to be a process. And that, my friend, is when you know you're ready to go on the Enneagram journey, is when you're willing to do the work to actually figure out who you are. So let's go ahead and talk about this, because there are three main things that I'm going to give you to help you figure out your type today. And I want to clear up some confusion so you know exactly how to figure out your Enneagram type. So let's go over this really quick. There's 9 different Enneagram types. And if you want to learn about those 9 types, go all the way back to my podcast episode 61. It was published at the beginning of 2020, and I go in depth about the 9 different types and their core motivation, because their core motivation is how you figure out your type. You're going to identify with a motivation. It's not about being just like extroverted or really enjoying adventures and traveling, because so many different types can enjoy those things. So many different types struggle with people pleasing or really enjoy being successful or are great at being perfectionists or achievers. But when we look at the root and the motivation, that's what matters. So episode 61, that's where you're going to learn all about the motivations of each type. But the 3 steps to figuring out your type, the first thing is you have to be willing to educate yourself, and you have to do the work to educate yourself. So you could do this through podcast, YouTube channels, taking an online course, joining a membership. It could be anything where you're reading a book, you're just educating yourself and choosing to dive deep into this Enneagram knowledge so that you can understand what it means, what it looks like, what you look like in health and stress, and learning about all 9 types so you can identify your type. And that's the sub point of point number 1, is you make the decision. It's not a test. It's not a certified coach. There's nothing special about us where it's like, let me tell you your type. I can lead people and help them by asking the right questions. Yes, because I've studied it, but only you know what's inside of you. Only you can determine what motivates you. You can look outgoing to me, but I can't tell you, oh, Sharon, you're outgoing because you just want people's approval, or because you don't feel seen and heard, and so you're trying to be outgoing. Like, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you what's inside of you. So you're going to be the one to identify your own Enneagram type. And it's a process. I say this so much and I feel like a broken record, but it's truly a process. I have worked with so many people who have mistyped themselves, and they're individuals who know the Enneagram. Like, they've read quite a few books, they've dug into it, but they mistyped themselves, and we figure out that they're not actually the type they thought they were, and that's okay. You guys have probably heard my story, but when I first took a test, which I'm about to get to on point number 2, but when I first took a test, I typed as a type 7, and then I typed as a type 8, but I'm actually a type 3. And so it can take a process to really learn and understand the complexity of Enneagram wisdom to figure out what your tripe, wow, words, struggling, what your type truly is. And that's a good thing. It's that journey that I mentioned at the beginning that you have to be willing to go on. So, point number 2, this brings me to tests and quizzes. Should you take them? Here's the thing. I don't recommend them just because I simply believe that they often confuse people more than help people. But hear me out. If you choose to take a quiz or a test, that's okay. Just know that they're only 60 to 80% accurate. We as humans naturally will test as a way that we want to test, and it can just be hard to know yourself and to know how to answer the questions correctly. And so with that, you can often get common mistypes, or you just feel confused about what your type actually is. So if you take a test or a quiz, my recommendation is most tests and quizzes will give you your top 3 numbers. When you get that result, use that as a starting place, being like, cool, I resonate with the 2, 6, and 9. I'm going to go research more about these, listen to some podcast episodes, and really dig into this information. And that's fine if you use it that way. I think the thing that is scary with tests, scary sounds so dramatic, but basically the thing that can be harmful or just not as helpful is people take the quiz or the test and they feel like that's official. Like, I took a test, and so it feels like I got this definite answer that this is my type, but it doesn't mean that. It does not mean you are doomed to that number or that is your number. You often have more research to do. So just to recap that really quick, point number 1, educate yourself. Books, courses, podcast, anything that you can just learn about Enneagram knowledge, and especially from people who are certified. By the way, I am an official certified Enneagram life coach. I got my certification through Your Enneagram Coach, and it was an incredible training. So just make sure you're learning from people who know what they're talking about. Step number 2 is taking tests and quizzes. Yes, you can take it. Just make sure you take it with open hands, knowing that it doesn't mean that is your type. Continue to research, continue to learn, and use it as a starting point. And it could be dead on. Like, there are people like my husband who is a type 5. He knew he was a type 5. He was able to take a test and it said type 5. Some people are more obvious than others. Doesn't mean anything's wrong with you, okay? So continue on your process and your own journey. The third thing is no one knows what is inside of you. So it can take a while to really process through the Enneagram information to get to know your type. So what I mean by this is I worked with a client recently who had studied the Enneagram for 3+ years, and she really felt educated in this. But she didn't realize, like, we got to the root of this. She didn't realize for how many years she's been deceiving herself, acting like she didn't have a problem because subconsciously she was ashamed of that problem, didn't want to have that problem anymore. And so she almost put this cover up, not almost, she did. She had this cover up of a different type because that's who she wanted to be. It's who she aspired to be, especially when she's healthy. She wanted to look like someone like that. And it's insane to me, just this is so biblical as well, is how easy it is to deceive ourselves into being someone we're not. When I tested as a type 8, I tested as an 8 because I wanted to be better at conflict and just really uncomfortable situations. And so I tested that way, as like, oh yeah, I'm good with conflict. I'm really good at addressing hard things. When on the inside, it's like, no, I'm like crying every day because I'm so offended. Not really. But that has been like some deep work I have really had to grow in and need to continue to grow in. So it's just interesting how we can deceive ourselves, and that's where it takes time to work through it. If you're really unhealthy, you may not know it, but if you are really unhealthy, it can be hard to figure out your Enneagram type because you look like a completely different number. And then I've also found that incredibly healthy people are hard to type because they're such a well-rounded human. And when you read like the cute Instagram posts or funny videos about the different Enneagram types, that's usually how our types look based on like average to unhealthy, like our stereotypes. And so when you're really healthy, you may not look like your type. Like, let's look at type 8s. Type 8s kind of get this bad rap of like they're super rude. They're really blunt. They just walk over people. They put people back in their place, and they can be very offensive. That's an unhealthy 8. A healthy 8 is super gentle. They're really kind. They're tenderhearted. And so you almost don't recognize them because they've learned how to control themselves. They've learned how to maintain that anger and that drive for justice within themselves in such a healthy way. And so they don't always look like their type. So basically what I'm saying with point number 3 is that you have to realize it takes a while to really get to know yourself. And you're going to take time observing yourself, watching how you respond to situations, asking yourself questions like, why did that frustrate me? Why is this so annoying? And it's going to take time to get to the root of it. And that's great. That's the work that we have to do. So number 1, we're going to educate ourselves. Number 2, you can take a test or a quiz. Number 3, you have to take the time and the process to really get to know yourself, to observe yourself, to figure out your Enneagram type. And remember, it's just a number. You can still practice being self-aware. You can still practice getting to know yourself. And it's not about arriving to this goal of figuring out your specific number. You will identify with a main type and take time with it. Enjoy the process and enjoy growing. For additional resources, if you're like, okay, I really want to dive into this more, like you're speaking to me, I want to understand myself. In my membership program, I have a course, a little mini course that I take people through to help them figure out their type. It's where I really educate you. I take you through a workbook. I ask you questions. And if you're in my membership program, you have exclusive access to this mini course. And I walk you through that. And in my membership, people also get to ask me questions. There's coaching sessions. And so what that means is I have people come to me saying like, Callie, I am stuck between a type 2 and a type 7. Please help me out. And it's awesome because I get to problem solve with them what parts they're resonating with, what parts they're not resonating with, and just asking questions to really help them figure out their type and get to the root of that. So if you're interested in checking out that membership program and having access to that mini course, you can go to callieammons.com/membership and you'll have all the information there, or down in the show notes below, you're going to see a link. But I just want to thank you so much for hanging out with me today and for choosing to grow yourself. If you're still watching or listening to this, you care to develop yourself, and that means you're my kind of people. It's who I like to spend time with. And if you're listening to the podcast right now and you want to watch the video version of this podcast episode, make sure you head over to my YouTube channel. Just search Callie Ammons, my name, and you'll find me there. Hit subscribe so you don't miss any videos, because we are putting out so much good content that is helping you become the person you want to become. I'll see you guys next week.